In these recordings, I'll be reading a bit from my book, Mindful Ethnography, Mind, Heart, and Activity for Transformative Social Research, and talking a little bit about the ideas that I generate in the book and my motivations for writing. I'll unpack a few of the key ideas and elaborate on and share some of the activities I designed for connecting mindfulness and mindfulness practices with ethnography. Each track is accompanied by music. This music was composed, digitally produced with electronic music and live tenor sax by my son, Andrés Orellana. And the cover image was created by my daughter, so I'm giving equal time to my children who are both performing artists. If you like the music, you can find more by Abstract Apathy. That's the name Andrés uses in his music on Spotify. On the front cover image, be sure to peek inside the third eye, because my daughter Elisa Noemi took seriously the task of bringing together mind, heart, and activity within this image. So how do we bring together our hearts, spirit, intuition, our minds, which serve us quite well, especially in academia, but sometimes get us divorced from our hearts and spirits, and bring that together with action in the world, right action to alleviate suffering, reduce inequalities, address injustices, and make a difference. That's what I'm trying to take on in this book, how to bring together mind, heart, and activity for transformative social research. Now, why am I reading from this or sharing these in this way? I'm reluctant to participate in the neoliberal press to promote and sell our ideas. I've gotten we're in a time when we are being expected to sell ourselves to the marketplace of ideas out there. I write about my concerns about this notion that we can ever own ideas, how silly we academics are thinking that ideas are the unique property of individuals. I rather like to think of these ideas as instruments for changing the world. And I think about, and here in the book I discuss the tensions I experienced between my activist and scholarly identities. When I identified principally as an activist, I was really happy when I found other people who thought like me and said the same things I was saying. Together, this made the messages we delivered louder. And I think, wouldn't it be fabulous if the idea were flooded with the values we believe in? So I don't pretend that these ideas are uniquely mine or I'm the only one saying them. They're just my contribution to that larger chorus. I recognize that this is complicated in academia, where individuals stand to benefit from the ownership of ideas, where originality matters and ego reigns. So I certainly try to give credit where credit is due, to counter histories of appropriation, to challenge the politics of citations in which the rich tend to get richer, and those who are already visible become more visible. Not surprisingly, those people are disproportionately white, male, and from the global English-speaking North. I recognize that I participate in those politics, and part of my work was to try to make a conscientious effort to bring muted and silenced voices to the table and into this dialogue. I'm trying to connect my ideas with those of others, giving others more visibility, even as we build a larger shared vision together. So I'm not really trying to do this just to promote my book. But I worked really hard on this book, and I feel something in me compelled me to write it. I don't try to claim that these ideas are uniquely mine. I put them together in my own way. I've tried as best I could to locate my ideas within larger histories, and honor the ideas of others, bringing together voices and perspectives that are not often in the same conversations, I think helps to spread their reach. And we can offer that to the world in the hope that the conversation will continue and grow. I write about this in the final chapter in terms of treating our writing as a gift. It's an offering, and that shifts our attention in some important ways. We can give gifts. The world may or may not want the gifts we offer. We can receive gifts. If we accept them with open hearts, we may find something useful or surprising in them. And the task for the gift giver is to prepare the gifts with love and care and then let them go. So that's what I'm trying to do here now. I worked really hard on crafting the words and the ideas in the book in its written form. I'm sharing some of these thoughts now in spoken form. I enlisted my children to support me in creating this as an artistic vision, and I offer it in the hope that it'll be useful to some other people, just as the ideas that I read about and brought together in this book and that I experienced in my life, in my body, in my psyche, in my spirit, that those ideas will be useful to others as well. I'd like to say a little more about why I wrote this book, Mindful Ethnography, Mind, Heart, and Activity for Transformative Social Research. Again, just shout outs to my son, Andrés Orellana, for the music that accompanies this track. He created each one uniquely for this book. And why I'm sharing it in this way, despite my hesitance to engage in the kind of self-promotion and selling of ideas that abounds in academia. Something compelled me to write this book. I felt an urgency to share some of the things that practices I've taken up in my life, especially after receiving a cancer diagnosis 10 years ago, and other things where many aspects of my life were feeling very challenged. So taking up those practices, but then seeing how mindfulness practices didn't just help me to feel more centered and calm and clear and connected, but they were about connecting with compassion and empathy for other people's struggles and for my own. And for seeing in new ways and expanding our ways of seeing and being more open and curious and seeking connection and commonality and wonder and awe and all of these things that I think we need more of in the world. So seeing how ethnography and mindfulness came together for me in my own life, and that I think together they offer something unique and important to the world, to the moment that we're living in this world. A moment of polarization, divisiveness, fear, tremendous fear, sort of shutting down, closing off, erecting borders, walls at borders, political borders, but also in our hearts. And also tremendous confusion over competing ideas about truth, claims being made that are not particularly heart-centered. So to me, there's something about uniting our minds and our hearts and our commitments in the world. And that's what I wanted to write about. I wrote this despite my own fears, tremendous fears, lots of mind chatter going off in my own head about who am I to write this book, and do I know enough about mindfulness and the many wisdom traditions that I reference in the book? Do I know enough? I guess I feel a little more certain of what I know about ethnography because I've practiced that as a professional for some 30 years. And I also stake some claim in what I learned from my work as an activist in a variety of contexts, starting with the Central American Solidarity Movement in the 80s, and bringing that into my scholarly work. But I've always kept my scholarly and activist and spiritual seeker identities somewhat separate. What does it mean to bring them together and to stake my claims about the importance of bringing them together in this book, and to make that argument or offer that gift, if you will? Maybe it's not an argument at all, just a gift, a possibility, something that I offer to the world, but to a world that is to the world of scholars and the world of activists. I'm not sure that spiritual seekers will really be reading this book because I'm not sure they're looking for the kinds of things I offer about ethnography, but I'm trying to offer this to the world of academia, and especially I think to young scholars, junior scholars coming into this business, trying to figure it out, sorting out how are we supposed to make these truth claims and stake our name and contribute something to the world, a world that so needs our work, but the world of academia that is often driven by divisiveness, ego, separation, rather than uniting to try to transform the world. So I wrote this book despite my fears of judgment by scholars, by activists, and even by the activist and scholarly parts of myself. Those are probably my worst, the worst mind chatter that goes off is the fears that we raise for ourselves. In the book, I share many of the challenges I faced as I tried to bring together my own identity as a scholar and an activist and someone on some kind of spiritual pathway. I describe those tensions as generative, and I do think that tensions are generative when we don't feel oppressed to resolve them right away, when we don't pose them as dualities. It doesn't have to be a choice between being either a scholar or an activist, either an activist or a spiritual seeker. But if we hold spirituality, heart-centeredness on one point of a triad, our mind and rational ways of knowing on another point, and our activity in the world, activism, experience as a third point in the triad, then those tensions between each side become generative. They don't pull apart. I write about that more in the introduction. For sure, I'm aware of the critiques of the mindfulness movement in academia. Some have critiqued it as the co-optation of ancient spiritual practices for a neoliberal agenda and claim that this draws away from addressing social injustices in the world. I'm aware of that critique. But I assert my own argument, or again, rather than an argument, because one of the things I do in the book is look at the words we use. Why do things have to be an argument? Why does it have to be a struggle? Could it be a dance? Could it be an offering? Could it be a gift? So I offer the possibility that conscious engagement of both heart and mind can support social science researchers who want to contribute to much-needed, uncharted paths towards social transformation. I write for those of us who want to do more than just write thoughtfully about the world as it is, or as we think it is, based on how we see it, and who want to do more than just critique it a little more mindfully. But instead, how could we imagine how it could be, reimagine it, and engage in activity that is informed by both our hearts and our minds in order to collectively bring into being a better one? I know that sounds a little grand, ambitious, some might say utopian, but I think we have to hold out a vision for the possibility of transformation. And we have to join together in the chorus to try to bring that into being. The book dances with the central dilemma of ethnography, and perhaps of all research and all of life, the relationship between self and other. Individual selves, individual others, and us's and them's groups. I consider approaches we might take to better see more empathically and more clearly, with compassion for ourselves and for others, and perhaps at times to rethink the relationship of self and other in entirely different and non-dualistic ways. Just whom do we create as others? We create them in opposition to what aspects of ourselves? What empathy walls do we put up as we decide that someone is another? And might ethnographic methods, coupled with mind-hearted practices, help us to surmount some of those walls, perhaps to transcend our own limits on how far we are able or willing to go, or at least better recognize the limits? What might we see on the other side, and how might that help us in our efforts to transform the world? I mean, I get that some people are going to say, well, we just can't talk to people who understand the world in fundamentally different ways. But if we don't talk to them, how are we going to have any chance of getting anywhere in the collective problems that face us? We don't have to agree with everyone we talk to, but the first part might be talking, or better yet, listening to people who think a little differently than we do. I explore these and other ideas in the book, throughout the book, in different ways. I bring them into practice in a series of activities that are designed to conjoin mindfulness with ethnographic methods at different stages of the research. So I look at these questions in relation to designing our projects, especially thinking about the questions we ask and the ways we focus our attention. I think about it practically in terms of how can we enter the field and see with fresh eyes for the first time, see in new ways. What do we see? How can we escape seeing through the categories of our culture or the ways we've been conditioned to see the world through our own histories of experiences? Which doesn't mean not using them. We are the instruments of our ethnographic work. We bring our histories of experiences in the world. We bring our eyes, our ears, our minds, our hearts to the work. We're important instruments of the work. But we can become a little more aware of how our instruments work, a little more attuned to them, and attuning of them, and in the process maybe expand some of our ways of seeing, and become more self-aware. So I look at it in terms of entering the field, but also in terms of getting in and getting along when the things get hard, when we start to spend more time with the people we like in the field and a little bit less with the people we feel some difference to. And that doesn't have to be difference along the big axes of race, ethnicity, gender, social class. It can just be, a kind of person you've decided isn't like you, and you're not quite so willing to listen to. So getting in, getting along. Then there's just the hard work of writing up field notes, sitting at our desks and having to recreate those moments in the field. So I suggest how mindfulness approaches can help us to relive and re-experience our lives, our experiences as field workers, and take a little more pleasure in the tasks we have of writing them up. I have a chapter on analysis where I shake up some of the ways I learned to be rigorous and disciplined in my analysis. I'm not saying there isn't a place for that, but I suggest some other possibilities that maybe open us up a little more to the intuitive, to the other ways of knowing, dancing with our data, and telling the stories of our analytical dances. And then I have a chapter on representing the work, writing it up. What does it mean to share, to assert our stories about what we learned, and how can we do that in ways that are truly respectful of the people we represent? Throughout these chapters, I share examples from my own research and that of others, and I created a series of little activities for ethnographers to try. So let's do one of those. And then I'll share a few others in other tracks on this recording. Okay. So, everybody settle into your seat. Put your feet on the floor. Feel the earth beneath you. Maybe there's a floor. Maybe the earth is somewhere much further down. But it's there somewhere. You're anchored onto this planet in a particular place and moment in time. There's a history to that, to your being here and to the land beneath you. And we can honor that history and connect to it. Closing our eyes, we attune more to this moment we are living, this place we are in, the histories of experiences that we bring to this work and to this moment in our own lives. So stop. Take a few long, deep breaths. Watch your breath rise and fall, and let the words that you've just heard me read or that you read yourself settle. Let them settle themselves. What do you notice in your body? Are there points of tension in your stomach, your chest, your throat, your head? Where do you feel tight? Where do you feel at ease? What thoughts bubble up in your mind? Just notice them like clouds in the sky. Sit with the thoughts and feelings without trying to control them or constrict them. Do that as long as you can, or at least just for a few minutes. Just notice and become aware that you are noticing. Think of your thoughts like words on the screen of your mind. They arise, they fall away, they're interesting. You might consider them clever. You might think you need to believe everything you think, but you don't. Notice them. Watch them rise and fade away. After you let things settle in this way, you might choose to deliberately turn on your analytical, questioning, searching mind. That's the part of our mind that we're very good at in academia. We're ready to pose questions, critique things, point out words, ideas that you think are misguided or missing or wrong. Maybe not just critique. Maybe you have some questions, things you're just not clear about, things that are confusing, troubling, something you just read or heard me say might leave you wondering. Notice. When you finish this exercise, you might jot down some of those questions, those wonderings, those critiques. But right now, just see if you can connect the feelings in your body with the concerns in your mind. Notice. You don't have to resolve anything right now. Just notice and keep those questions and wonderings and concerns and critiques dancing as you continue either reading in this book or listening to other parts as I read them aloud. Thank you for listening today, for letting me share with you in this way. And I'll stop this track for now, and I'll do a few more recordings with other activities like this one. Thank you.